Welcome to everyone tuning in to join us for the December edition of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation's First Fridays series. My name is Lance Gould, and I am the host of First Fridays, and we're going to do something a little different this month. We're going to both look back and look ahead. That's a very January thing because, of course, Janus was the two-headed Greek god who looked ahead and behind, but we're doing it in December because, well, we feel this is a good time to be taking perspective. Major geopolitical changes loom ahead, and the work that the Samuel Lawrence Foundation does is more important than ever. In fact, there are four key areas that Samuel Lawrence does its work: promoting the arts, education, and science, as well as decrying the dangers of nuclear waste. And today we're going to look back at highlights from the last 11 episodes of First Fridays and pick the most important moments that dovetail with these four sectors. Joining me today are two key members of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation team: Samuel Lawrence Foundation President Dr. Bart Ziegler and Programs Director Taylor Moore. Before we get started on that review, Bart, what are your reflections on 2024 and the work that Samuel Lawrence Foundation is doing?
Thank you, Lance. It's truly an honor to welcome you to our final webinar of 2024, hosted by the Samuel Lawrence Foundation. As we gather here today, I find myself reflecting on what has been an extraordinary year, a year of challenges, breakthroughs, and most importantly, hope. At the heart of our mission lies the belief that education, the arts, and the sciences have the power to transform lives and shape our future. This year, we have seen countless examples of that transformation in action, whether through innovative approaches in education, the resilience of artistic expression in uncertain times, or the tireless pursuit of scientific knowledge. 2024 has reminded us the strength of the human spirit. For our foundation, it's been a year of deepened commitment as we focus on critical issues such as the existential nuclear waste at San Onofre, California. We've been reminded of the importance of collaboration, transparency, and courage. The progress we've made and the conversations we've sparked are a testament to the idea when people come together with purpose, meaningful change is possible. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Let's take this time together to reflect, to inspire, and to continue building a brighter, more sustainable future. Thank you.
Excellent. So let's start this reflection on the year by talking about nuclear waste. Viewers may not know this, but 3.6 million pounds of nuclear waste is stranded at the beach, just 100 feet from the ocean at San Onofre, California, not far from San Diego, something the team at SLF is trying to change. To set up our first video clip, here's Taylor.
Thank you, Lance. This first video is going to be the longest segment that we share today because it lays the entire foundation for the heart of the mission here at Samuel Lawrence Foundation, and that's addressing the critical issue of nuclear waste. As Lance mentioned, there are over 3.6 million pounds of highly radioactive nuclear waste sitting just 100 feet from the ocean in thin-walled metal canisters in an area that's highly vulnerable to natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis. There's more than 9 million people living within a 50-mile radius of this site. This next clip, it's from our 2024 February webinar, and it takes a closer look at the history and the circumstances that brought us to this point. Let's take a look.
So I have to ask, Admiral, how did 3.6 million pounds of such toxic waste get stranded next to Pendleton on our beach?
It's stuck at Pendleton because there is no repository, long-term repository for the waste across the entire country. So until we find a solution, that waste will have to sit there. But in the world of nuclear, the risk factor that we use in the Navy is if there was a risk at all, any percentage whatsoever, you did everything that you possibly could to abate it or you stopped it. And that is not the case under the current conditions.
San Onofre's lethal waste is stored in thin metal canisters, placed in a wet, salty environment. These canisters were engineered not for long-term storage in any location, let alone a marine environment 100 feet from a rising ocean.
Since temporary storage was the presumption, Edison selected cheaper thin metal canisters that were far less robust, than the thick casks being used in most other countries that had nuclear power.
In the loading process, there is a very large risk that those canisters were scratched as they slid down into their storage silo, completely different from what might have been designed had NRC actually seen a working variant of the process, which they did not.
We have pictures of a scratch going the full length of the canister. There's a patch maybe 4 to 5 inches wide of obvious corrosion.
The whole design philosophy behind these canisters is that they were there essentially to be a temporary storage until the fuel would be moved to a permanent repository. That is now an open-ended time frame. So these temporary canisters are now essentially permanent canisters for all intents and purposes.
A much less noticeable threat, I think, is gaining more attention now that the king tides and extreme weather conditions from climate change are becoming more apparent. With sea level rise comes groundwater level rise, which currently fluctuates near the bottom of the canisters. Capillary wicking action of moisture allows water to flow through the soil in all directions, including upwards. And by looking at the conditions of the tsunami wall, you can see the effect the ocean has had on metal and concrete. There's no way to unweld the canisters right now to see what the condition of the fuel is inside. So I would rather ask the question, not how long will they last, but how soon could they fail?
That's really the question, the largest question that everyone who's involved here continues to ask. And it is the whole issue on a thin-walled canister and how many or what has happened to those thin-walled canisters in the process of movement. Are any of them scratched? Did they receive a scratch? And how deep is that scratch? Because the corrosion of that thin-walled canister is totally dependent on the environment that it's subjected to. And that's where the risk factor really comes in when they say, well, the risk is minimal. The risk is not minimal because it cannot be measured. And if it cannot be measured, then you have to assume that it can occur.
So if a tsunami hit songs, what type of catastrophe would we encounter?
When it does, the devastating effect will far exceed that of the ongoing Fukushima disaster, simply because of San Onofre's proximity to a very dense population. So much other infrastructure would also be destroyed that nuclear waste at San Onofre could only be protected by addressing this issue before the big one hits. We need to move the canisters to higher ground, switch from thin canisters to thick casks, and build a robust above-ground storage facility like they had at Fukushima. Those casks survived unscathed.
And then get involved. Make sure that individuals understand and know what they're facing. It is not something that's going to solve itself without pressure. And that pressure needs to come from the local community and the local citizens who expect something to be done for their own safety's sake.
Wow, rewatching that clip and hearing it live now, or watching a tape of that then live clip, it seems like a movie, a disaster movie, the setup to a disaster movie, like something about 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. We're talking about thin-walled canisters. We're talking about marine conditions that can impact and corrode those casks, those thin-walled casks. We're talking about a huge population. And let me just note that was Admiral Len Herring who was speaking, a high up admiral in the Navy. These are not liberal loons. These are, a conservative admiral from the Navy. This is Gary Hedrick of the San Clemente Foundation. This is Greg Jasko, former director of the Nuclear Regulatory Agency. These are the people who are warning of these of the impending disaster that lies ahead. So my thought was it just reminds me of a disaster movie, but it's very real. Bart, what are your thoughts?
Lance, that's so aptly put. We at the Samuel Lawrence Foundation are so grateful to not only the partners, but the support we've gotten from the community around the nation. All these speakers that came, that you've seen on stage, were also at our symposium that was put on at UCSD, with introduced by the director of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. This has just been this is a preposterous situation that has been well represented in that clip. Thank you, Taylor. It just seems to me like the more support we can get from around the community and around the nation to deal with this issue, is the better off the nation will be from the health and safety risks that this spent nuclear fuel and the radiation high burn fuel can present to as a grave risk to our communities, our local communities, and our planet.
Bart, if I could just add that, like, you hit the nail on the head there, and I think Gary Hendricks said it in the video clip. It's not a question of how long they will last. It's like how long until they fail. I think we have to look at it from that perspective. The urgency of this is not like how long will these thin wall canisters last. It's how long until they don't.
Kristen,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. If I may add, this is this stuff is deadly for 100,000 years, which is more than my mind can think of.
Yeah. Taylor, why don't you go ahead and introduce the next clip for the nuclear waste section.
Thank you, Lance. Yeah, in the second clip, we're going to dive a little bit deeper. We're going to hear from Dr. Mark C. Jacobson, who is not only a Stanford University professor, but a renowned scientist. And he's going to outline the climate implications of new nuclear and also give us alternate renewable energy options that are not only more climate friendly, but they also make more economic sense. Let's take a look.
It takes 10 to 22 years between planning and operation of every single nuclear reactor ever built. And most recently, it's mostly between 17 and 22 years in liberalized markets versus 0.5 years for rooftop solar. If we're going to invest in one technology, such as nuclear versus wind and solar, we're pretty much committing ourselves to not solving the climate problem on any short timescale. It's 15 to 24 times the capital cost for new nuclear compared with new wind or onshore wind or utility scale solar. Because of the time lag between planning and operation, nuclear will never pay off its CO2 and pollution emission it causes. So in terms of solving the problem of climate change and air pollution and energy security, new nuclear is no help whatsoever.
Good clip. Mark Jacobson, great friend to the show, great thinker. And what's important here to note in context is that a lot of experts point to small modular reactors as a real key critical component to a phasing out of fossil fuels. That we need to get rid of fossil fuels, so we need to bring in renewable or clean energy. And a lot of people look at nuclear as a clean energy, but it isn't clean when you look at the waste that is the byproduct of this endeavor. And what do we do with that waste? And as Dr. Jacobson points out, the time that will take to build these small modular reactors, about 15 to 17 years, it's too late. It's going to be much too late for us if we wait that long to build these reactors, and the carbon emissions from building those won't pay off in the long run for actually utilizing them. Bart, what are your thoughts?
Amazing, Lance, what you grasp. It's taken me 10 or 12 years to learn about this stuff. It's very complex to learn about nuclear and the foibles and the importance of it. I'm glad there's more research and development. There always needs to be developing new technologies and understanding a lot of health aspects of the stuff. But it's really important to understand that our regulatory agencies need to take care of the nation's safety and health. And it seems like the NRC drops the ball a lot. So I think it's really, the more people learn, the more people will know, and the more corrected our direction will be using clean, renewable energy. instead of this nuclear.
That sounds right. Let's move on to the next section now. Our second segment is going to shine a light on education, which is the backbone of progress and opportunity within SLF's mission. This segment will delve into how education shapes future leaders, bridges divides, and equips individuals with the tools to create meaningful change in their communities and beyond. Here's Bart to set up our first video clip on education.
Thank you, Lance. Education is the foundation for creating a more equitable and just world. This past October, we explored how to improve global education systems, address issues of equity, and harness the transformative power of education to drive social change. 4 different leaders joined us to reflect on what's working in education today and discover innovative ways to shape a brighter future for all learners. One of the speakers is Dr. Jelani Nelson. He's the chair of Computer Science Division and math professor at UC Berkeley. Dr. Nelson is also committed to teaching coding skills to those in Ethiopia and Jamaica. He's been awarded by the Obama administration, and in the following clip, he shares a little more about his experience.
I would say computer science in the US, you see a lot of gender disparities, more boys going into it, more boys interested in it in high school, and more young men majoring in computer science at the university level. We see the exact opposite in Jamaica. So we have an open application. Anyone can apply to, any high schooler can apply to Jam Coders. Consistently over the last 3 iterations of the program, we have about 60% of the applicants are girls, and they're very strong. And about 60% of the kids who end up, matriculating into the program are girls. So I'd love to know what Jamaica is doing to get more girls into computer science. We're not seeing it in the US, but that's one thing I've observed. One thing else, I have a few things to say about Ethiopia. We partner there with the government. So the Ethiopian Ministry of Education, Addis Ababa University, which itself has many campuses. We work most closely with the Addis Ababa Institute of Technology, which is their engineering campus. Everyone really, let me put it this way, like if I were to run a program like this here in the US, or even when I run it in Jamaica, a lot of things cost money. It's provide room and board. The housing costs money, right? We have to pay for the dormitories for the students. In Ethiopia, the government looks at us like Addis Coder Inc. is doing the government a favor. They say, Jelani, you guys are coming and you're helping us accomplish our mission. Like, we view it as the government's job to provide education. They give us the dorms for free. Everything's free, basically. They give us the dorms for free. They give us the classrooms and the computer lab access for free. We pay the costs that are real, like, we feed the students, we pay for the catering, we pay for the transportation for the teaching assistants and for the lecturers, as well as for the students to bring them to the capital. So those costs we pay. But in terms of access to like physical space and so forth, like things, sunk costs that are owned by the government, they just give it to us freely. So I don't know what the lesson is there. I mean, I just find it very nice that the government invests their resources into things like this without expecting revenue generation.
Wow, this was such an inspiring webinar for me, honestly, as concerning, I suppose it is, to see this trend in the US at the same time, to see more than half of the participants in coding programs being females and young girls in Jamaica is just incredible. And it makes me wonder, what can we learn from their approach, right, to improve the gender representation, the gap in tech education in the US. And I think this is something that Jelani answered a little bit when he was talking about Ethiopia. He gave an example of low-income students excelling because of the strong government support, right, and because of the pro-education culture. And that's really powerful in showing that values and investment can far outweigh economic disadvantages, because it shows us that education success isn't just about resources, right? But it's also about creating a culture that values learning in general. And so these successes from both Jamaica and Ethiopia are a reminder, I think, to us in the US and other places around the world that innovation in education doesn't necessarily only come from wealthier nations. It can also just come from a commitment to inclusion and a commitment to equity in general.
I couldn't agree more, Taylor. That's very well said, and it's just really inspiring to see what Dr. Nelson is doing in these two countries that are categorized as "quote unquote" developing nations. Also, as we consider what's looming ahead for us here, um, education itself is on the education department is on the chopping block potentially. Education is in the crosshairs of the national cultural conversation, and it really shouldn't be the case. And there's so much we could learn from countries that could well be looking to us as the U.S. has always held the mantle for what other countries could be following. But here, I feel like we're really falling behind.
If I could just add, Lance,
Of course.
I've read that in India they're minting 350,000 engineers a year, I mean, and in the U.S. we put out about 70,000 engineers a year. It's how certain countries embrace education is definitely worth what Taylor said. Oh,
Absolutely. Bart, you want to give us why don't you tell us about the next clip from the education section?
the next clip we have from our March 2024 video podcast, which celebrated Women's History Month. We heard from 4 incredible female leaders who shared their thoughts on educating the next generation of women and finding sustainable solutions for our economy, society, environment, planet. One of these voices belongs to Melissa Sims, a powerhouse attorney who's using the legal system to hold the fossil fuel industry's worst offenders accountable to climate change. Let's hear what she had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taught every night before I went to bed, my mother would say, "What did you do to help other people today?" Right? So it's part of ingrained in your sinus rhythm as to finding ways to right wrongs. And that's part of what I do now is I look to see who is affected by this. And 9 times out of 10, it's a community of color. And so then I try to find innovative ways to get around certain laws that are on the books to try to get them some compensation or just get it cleaned up.
Wow.
I really appreciated Melissa sharing almost like a personal story here. She told us about how her mother would ask, "What did you do to help other people today?" And I think that just perfectly exemplifies how we can kind of use education to instill a sense of service and a sense of empathy in young people. And again, it makes me think or wonder, I suppose, what type of impact that this could have if we integrated something like this into, let's say, school curriculums, middle school curriculums around the US, and used it as a type of reflection exercise or like a service learning project in communities. And that's something that we also try and do here at the Samuel Lawrence Foundation. Our goal here is to foster as much community engagement as possible and to get communities participating in both local issues and in global issues. And we do that by supporting partner organizations and fiscal sponsors because we want to strengthen everyone's community presence as much as possible through education.
She also is so inspiring. She reminds me so much of Erin Brockovich, and such a great role model, such a great woman role model. I love what she's doing in this in these communities, fighting for them from the legal from a legal perch, and it's just wonderful to see. And she's having real results, really having the fossil fuel companies on the run in so many instances. Let's move to our third segment, which celebrates the arts, another cornerstone of SLF's mission alongside science and education. This section highlights the transformative power of the arts to inspire change, foster connection, and address pressing challenges through creativity and expression. Here's Taylor to set up the first clip for this section.
Thank you, Lance. So here at SLF, we definitely recognize the power that art has to both transform communities and to connect people in ways that sometimes words just can't. So in this next clip, we're going to hear from renowned muralist Hubert Massey, and he's going to share his perspective on how the arts can be a unifying force for both addressing social challenges and also fostering a sense of identity and a sense of belonging.
Hubert, we have other panelists here today, Elisa and Mark, who represent the performance arts. But as a visual artist and a public artist, tell us about how your relationship with the audience is different. Clearly, you don't get that instant feedback from an audience like a dancer or a musician does. So tell us about your relationship with the audience that way.
Well, so because the pieces that I do is in the public side, and uh, like I was referring to before, um, I try to get the community involved because when I come into communities, I create these large pieces of artwork or installations and all. So we do community forum. We have dialogue, and when we have dialogue amongst the community, we really get a good sense of history and culture of the community. Um, for instance, in the city of Detroit, there was a place called Ferry Street, where African Americans couldn't walk on Ferry Street around the early 20s or so. And Mary Bethune, she was buying homes throughout the United States, bought a home on Ferry Street and Brush Street. And so the person who was selling the house said, "Well, we'll sell you the house if you move the front entryway from Ferry Street to Brush Street." So if you go there today, you actually see a beautiful porch with pillars and a bricked up wall, but you'll see the entryway that's on the Brush Street. And so in the mural, I did a large tile mural. It was 30 feet by 30 feet. We incorporated that in the mural because we wanted to be able to tell that history and that story about those experiences and all. And just to get that type of information by having those conversations really brings things to light so that we can work on change. The other thing was there was a large a mural that I created when people were doing Black Lives Matter. We did Power to the People. It was a 300-foot by 25-foot mural that we put on the street of Woodward, right down in the heart of Woodward. And there were so many people who resonated with that. One, Detroit went through a lot of things in the '67 uprising, and two, Detroit is a little different, and we wanted to pretty much showcase or express ourselves through the art of language that we use for the power of the people, and that resonated.
Hubert, wow. First, I just want to note to the audience that Hubert Massey is a renowned muralist in a discipline that's really it's very difficult, and he has a real legacy from one of the greats. Diego Rivera is one of the most world famous muralists who did a series of murals in Detroit, and Hubert learned um, uh, from his students. So Hubert has a direct line to some of the most famous muralists. Has a direct line to one of the most famous muralists in the world, who also has a Detroit background. And the other thing I wanted to note is when you hear about how an African American person could buy a home in Detroit, but only if they move the entrance to another street. That's the kind of fact that's under attack right now in so many conservative red states where they're trying to rewrite history and not let African American history be told. And this is an incredibly important thing that without learning history, and this is cliche to say, but it's true, without learning history, we're doomed to repeat it. And so how can we not celebrate and investigate the things that happened in history so that we can learn better from our mistakes? Bart, what are your thoughts?
Wow. I have to say, Lance, on the entire year of video podcasts, you're able to bring out some extraordinary dialogue. And the way you've just presented Massey's groundbreaking work is really compelling. And it just reminds me how artists, how important art is. If it's music or videos or visual arts or performance arts, somehow that is able to really engage the human spirit, the human soul, and deal with the complex problems that we have to address on the planet. Anyway, thanks a lot, Lance.
Thank you, Brian and Lance. So, something I've been bringing up a lot during this episode is inspiration, and I'm going to talk about it again here because I feel like it's pertinent. So, when we think of our oceans, right, they're not only incredibly important, they cover, I believe, more than 70% of Earth's surface, but they're more than just that. They're more than just ecosystems. Um, Oceans inspire a lot of art around the world. They inspire storytelling, and they just create like a general sense of wonder that can connect people no matter where we are. And Diana Nyad, who is the legendary endurance swimmer that swam from Havana, Cuba to the Florida Keys, really brought this connection to life for us. In this next clip, it's from our June 2024 World Oceans Day webinar. Diana talks about and reflects on this insanely profound beauty of our blue planet and how her awe for the oceans fuels a deep sense of responsibility to then protect them. Her words just remind us that the arts, just like her story, can really help amplify and give a platform to these critical messages and help inspire action. Let's take a listen.
I think the most emotional commentary that I know of that's come about our blue planet comes from astronauts. Who the only speck that they see in all of this universe, this chaos that we know of as of today, the only one that's blue is planet Earth. And I pulled up that wonderful Carl Sagan quote. God, I miss Carl Sagan. I don't know about you guys, but he said it's our responsibility to preserve and cherish that pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. And I can tell you that I myself, more than ever, standing on a shore or standing on a boat, to be immersed in this pale blue dot brought me to tears and a sense of awe of the beauty of our planet, our blue jewel of a planet. But it also brought me to a sense of responsibility. Like when I finally get out and get on the shore again, I've got to remember. I've got to remember the stunning beauty of this home of ours, this blue planet, and what can I do to keep these catastrophes? What I think a lot of us think, well, there's nothing we can do. It's so big. It's like talking about the billions of stars. When we talk about when Matthias tells us about the size of this plastic blob in the Pacific, what in the world can we do about it? Well, he and his group are doing something about it. Emily is doing something about it, and at least all of us can do one little thing, and that's not to use single-use plastics anymore.
Wow. Taylor, what a compelling clip. I'm just moved by, I could watch that 20 times. She has so much to offer in terms of bringing not only her courage of swimming 110 miles in the ocean, but just what a message. Lance, what do you think?
It's I think that it's wonderful to put this into the arts section. The movie that was based on Diana's attempts and final successful attempt to swim that 110-mile channel from Havana to Key West was made into a movie, and it was an Oscar nominated film with Jodie Foster and gosh, I'm forgetting the actress's name, but really showed her commitment to the environment, showed her commitment to art. She talks in the clip about beauty, and there really is so much more to just like there's so much beneath the waves and beneath the ocean that is visible. There's so much more to a story about an athlete swimming. It's really about commitment. It's really about the environment and her commitment to ending the use of single use plastic. There's so much more to Diana's story. And that brings us to our final section today, which focuses on the last pillar of SLF's mission, science. This segment highlights the critical role of scientific understanding in addressing climate change and environmental challenges, showcasing innovative solutions and urgent calls to action from experts in the field. Here's Bart to set up the first clip of the science section.
Thanks, Lance. In this next clip, we hear from Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate, whose journey began with a single climate strike in 2019 and has since grown into a global mission for environmental justice. Vanessa shares, all the way from Uganda, the pivotal moment that led her to focus on the Congo rainforest, the second largest rainforest in the world, and a critical lifeline for millions of people and countless species. Her group also aims to install solar panels on all of Uganda's 24,000 schools. Her story underscores the urgent need for action and awareness to protect this vital ecosystem before it's too late. Listen to her powerful reflection and call to action.
And I held my very first climate strike in the first week of January in 2019. Later in 2019, I got invited to give a speech at a Rotary Club. And I remember after giving that speech, one of the people asked me about the Congo rainforest. And he mentioned how so many people talk about the destruction of the Amazon, but there is not much conversation about what is happening in the Congo rainforest. And in that moment, I realized that I also didn't know much about what was happening there. So I took an initiative to learn more about the Congo rainforest. I got to learn that it was the second largest rainforest in the world and also the largest in Africa. And I believe that it's as essential as the Amazon rainforest. I remember reading an article that stuck with me that talked about how if the destruction in the Congo rainforest is not stopped, it could be lost by 2100. And this is a rainforest that is home to thousands of species, be it animal species, bird species, and also a place where 75 million people depend on its existence, either for food or access to medicine.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an incredible clip. And I think that Vanessa's story is a really powerful reminder about how awareness can spark action, right? Not to, jump too far back, but it makes me think of our segment we did today on nuclear waste, where we talked about needing awareness. And when people don't know about an issue, they're not going to act. But back to Vanessa, I think she's completely right. She's talking about how we essentially need to broaden our focus beyond what we think of as mainstream or well-known environmental issues like the Amazon, for example, to instead include other ecosystems that are just as critical, right? Just as vital to our planet's health and to the livelihoods of millions of people around our entire world. And it also makes you think, if we're missing things like this, what else are we not paying attention to? Again, the nuclear waste issue. And then how can we take that initiative, just like Vanessa did, to then make a difference?
My thought is that I agree with everything that you said, Taylor. Really, really well said. My thought is that, like Greta Thunberg and like so many other activists who are taking positions that could be unpopular, she was chastised and questioned by her own family about some of these decisions. She really is a heroine, or a hero who, in the face of much criticism from family, friends, society, has led climate strikes in Uganda, has taken a position that the environment is important, and has really shown a light on the Amazon gets all the attention deservedly, but this Congo rainforest basin, which many of us are not familiar with, and I'm not as familiar with as I could have been until Vanessa pointed out to us, is a critically important ecosystem that needs to be preserved, just like the Amazon. When they say the Amazon is the lungs of the world, so is the Congo rainforest basin. So there is so much more to be learned from this wide world in which we live, and which and where environmental abuse is taking place all over. And we also can learn from her uh, leadership position of, 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 of being strong in the face of withering criticism, which is something, again, as we face a new geopolitical landscape coming up in the next few months, in the next month, and the next few years. We've got to show courage to stand for what's right.
Lance couldn't have said it better, but just to let the audience know that we have a couple copies of her book. So if you write to Samuel Lawrence Foundation and want a copy of her book, we will be able to share that. In this final clip, we hear from Hank Rogers, a visionary leader who turned a personal experience into a mission to revolutionize energy systems. His work in Hawaii, a state uniquely positioned to lead the transition into green renewables, demonstrates the power of engaging communities and driving legislative change. Let's hear how this transformative journey unfolds.
Hank, you founded Blue Planet Alliance after successfully leading Hawaii to become the first U.S. state to legislatively mandate a transition to 100% renewable energy by 2045. That's a law. Hawaii has to go 100%. Tell us about how you got started on this initiative and what some of the measurable results have been so far.
So I had, after I sold my company, I had a near-death experience, which helped me to find my missions in life. My mission number one is to end the use of carbon-based fuel. I read in the newspaper that it was going to kill all the coral in the world by the end of the century. And so Hawaii, spending $6 billion on fossil fuel every year, and $3 billion of that going to electricity, was the perfect place to get started. So we engaged the children and we engaged the adults, and then finally we pushed the politicians and passed the law. It took us a number of years, but at the end we prevailed, and since then we've changed the business model of the utility, so they make more money by switching to renewables. And today Hawaii is at 36% renewable energy.
I just absolutely love this clip. I think that Hank's story is the perfect way to wrap up and close out our final episode of the year here, because it leaves us with a sense of hope and with a sense of purpose. His journey, it really shows us that even the most crazy, ambitious, large goals, like he talks about ending our reliance on carbon-based fuels, right, they are achievable. But we have to work together and we have to stay persistent. And I also want to know how he engaged every level of the community, right? Community is something that we talk about again and again here at SLF, but it's so incredibly important. And Hank, he was engaging children all the way up to legislators, policymakers. And it just goes to show yet again that real change happens when everybody plays a part. And I just hope that as we all reflect on everything that we've watched again and learned today, and throughout everything that we learned in the whole year of 2024, that we can, as Lance earlier said, remind ourselves to stand up in the face of criticism, to have that courage, and to remind ourselves that we all hold that power to make a difference, and that if we work together throughout all levels, that we can create a better future, a more sustainable future, and a more equitable and collaborative future.
Here, Taylor. That's really beautifully said. Let me just add about Hank. Some of the work that they're doing at Blue Planet Alliance. They're trying to replicate the success that they've had on Hawaii, getting that state to become the first U.S. state to legally mandate a transition to 100% renewable energy. Now they're bringing 10 islands at a time to Hawaii to give them a rigorous 1-week seminar on how they achieve what they achieved, featuring speakers like the governor who signed the bill, the state senator who authored the bill, academic superstars like Barack Obama's sister, who's on the University of Hawaii faculty. And if the U.S. is going to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord, like it seems that they may now with the new administration, it's up to states and countries to lead the way themselves. And if we can get states and countries to go 100% renewable, we can show leadership there that if the US is going to abdicate that kind of responsibility, the hope that we have, because we can't give up hope, like Taylor just said, the hope that we have is to find that leadership elsewhere. And I think that we are looking at a good example of that kind of leadership coming from Hank and Blue Planet Alliance. Bart, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I may just add that our foundation's working with Rita McDonald on staff here is working with the new mayor of Irvine, Larry Agran, to engage in California's own interest in dealing with the nuclear waste problem. So that's just another example of a state taking initiative for the citizens. It's just great to hear what you and how you and Taylor position what the beautiful words of Hank and his actions.
And because you gave a very deserved shout out to Rita, let me echo that Rita and Martha and Nadia on the team have all done amazing work. So I just want to give a shout out to those three, in addition to yourself and Taylor, who, the five of you are just doing incredible work with Samuel Lawrence Foundation. That about puts a cap on 2024 for us. I can't believe it's December already, and we're already looking at the end of the year here. But I want to thank the Samuel Lawrence Foundation for all your wonderful collaboration this year, and also to the man behind the scenes, Paul Shockley, for doing such a great job on the tech and really making this show hum. That concludes our program today. To rewatch the podcast or to see a transcript, go to the Samuel Lawrence Foundation website in the coming days. The website is samuellawrencefoundation.org. Please also visit brooklynstorylab.net to learn about the purpose-driven work that we are doing globally. Lastly, come back next year in January when we'll have another episode of First Fridays, and this time it will be a look at the power of filmmaking in the social good space. And now, for final words, back to Bart.
Lance, thank you for your moderation today. We hope to see all of you in the next Samuel Lawrence Foundation First Friday video podcast. If you want to hear, and Taylor, beautiful to collaborate with you. If you want to hear why we're here to stay at the Samuel Lawrence Foundation, sign up for our newsletter. And special thanks to our partners in support with Environmental Working Group, Sierra Club, Beyond Nuclear, Mothers for Peace, and all our staff.